Rap star Tupac Shakur died last night after a brief life in a rough business. He was 25. Tupac Shakur's murder was more than a tragedy. It was a turning point in music, in culture, and in America's obsession with fame and violence. For nearly 30 years, the case remained cold until one man, once a shadow in the story, suddenly stood in the spotlight, arrested, conflicted, and speaking out. But what if his words weren't what they seemed? The man charged in Tupac Shakur's murder is speaking out from behind bars for the first time. He was 300 meters away when the rapper was shot. Now he's pointing the finger at someone else. What if the truth had been twisted, buried, and reborn again behind steel bars? Tupac Shakur's murder suspect finally reveals the truth behind bars, and it's shocking. On the evening of September 7, 1996, Las Vegas was alive in a way only it could be: vibrant, loud, and restless. That night, the focus of the world was on the MGM Grand Garden Arena, a venue packed wall-to-wall with thousands of spectators. Mike Tyson, the heavyweight boxing champion, had just defeated Bruce Seldon in a match that cemented his comeback in the sport. But amid this spectacle, far from the spotlight, a very different drama was quietly unfolding just outside the arena. Tupac Amaru Shakur, already one of the most influential and controversial figures in hip-hop, was sitting in the back seat of a white BMW. His demeanor was calm but intense, eyes focused and thoughtful despite the exhaustion from the night's events. Next to him sat Suge Knight, the CEO of Death Row Records, known as much for his imposing presence as his business acumen. They were leaving the arena, surrounded by members of their entourage, when tensions that had been simmering earlier that evening began to surface. Just hours before, in the crowded chaos of the MGM Grand's parking lot, a violent confrontation had erupted between group and a young gang member named Orlando Anderson. The precise details of that scuffle remain unclear, but what is known is that the conflict left a residue of anger and resentment, a spark waiting to ignite. As Tupac's BMW approached the intersection of Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, the pulse of the city seemed to slow. The neon lights stretched out like veins of electricity across the pavement, casting flickering shadows. Then, out of nowhere, a white Cadillac appeared, pulling up alongside the BMW. The window slid down slowly, revealing a man whose face was marked by cold determination. Without warning, the quiet of the night was shattered by gunfire. Bullets tore through the air in rapid succession, striking Tupac multiple times for shots in total, hitting his chest, arm, and thigh. The Cadillac sped off immediately after, disappearing into the labyrinth of Vegas streets and the smoky haze that clung to the night. Paramedics arrived quickly, rushing Tupac to the University Medical Center. The medical staff worked tirelessly, fighting to save the rapper's life. But despite their efforts, the wounds proved fatal. 6 days later, Tupac Shakur succumbed to his injuries. His death sent shockwaves through the music industry, his fans, and the broader public. For nearly 30 years, the name Tupac Shakur echoed across generations, a symbol of artistic brilliance and tragic loss. His death became a myth, stories told and retold in music lyrics, documentaries, and whispered rumors. The case itself seemed cursed, a puzzle without pieces, an enigma wrapped in grief and conspiracy. Despite the magnitude of the crime, no arrests were ever made. No one was formally charged. The investigation was a ghost, drifting in shadows and hearsay, with leads that went cold or were quietly dismissed. Names floated in the undercurrent: gang affiliations, rival record labels, and shadowy figures, but none ever stepped fully into the light of justice. Yet beneath the surface, law enforcement never truly abandoned the case. Behind closed doors, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department painstakingly gathered interviews, reviewed scarce surveillance footage, and pored over witness statements. The files, thick and yellowing with age, sat frozen in archives, untouched by the public eye but never forgotten. Then, in a moment that stunned those who thought the case was closed for good, the ice began to crack. A man, long silent and hidden behind prison walls, suddenly found a voice. He stepped forward from obscurity, shattering the quiet with a confession that no one had anticipated. As he declared, the frozen case stirred back to life. The story of Tupac's murder was no longer just a whisper in the dark. It was about to be exposed in full, raw, complex, and more shocking than anyone could have imagined. Dwayne Keith Davis, who the streets knew better as Kef D, was no stranger to the gritty realities of the South Side. A reputed member of the Crips gang, his reputation was deeply entwined with the turbulent gang culture of Los Angeles. More than that, he was the uncle of Orlando Anderson, the young man who had been implicated early on as a prime suspect in the Tupac Shakur shooting but had always managed to slip through the grasp of law enforcement without charges. For years, Davis lingered on the fringes of the investigation, a shadow figure mentioned in whispers and scattered rumors. A man who knew more than he ever said but had managed to stay out of the legal crosshairs. Yet time has a way of eroding silence. Over the years, Davis began to break that code. His voice grew louder in public spaces. At first, he offered guarded comments in interviews, hinting at involvement without full disclosure. Then came television appearances where he spoke with an uneasy candor that seemed to pull back the curtain just enough to fuel speculation but stopped short of a full confession. And finally, in 2019, he took the step that shocked many: the publication of a memoir titled Compton Street Legend. The book was an unvarnished account of his life amid gang culture, but it also contained a bombshell. Davis described his presence in the infamous white Cadillac on the night Tupac was shot. He maintained that he was there but did not pull the trigger himself. This was the first time such an admission had come directly from someone so close to the case. But his claim was met with mixed reactions. The police had never recovered the gun. No fingerprints tied anyone to the crime scene, and no vehicle had ever been conclusively linked to the shooting. Davis's story, while chilling, was not backed by physical evidence. Still, it was a confession of sorts, a rare glimpse into a murky truth that had evaded justice for nearly 3 decades. For law enforcement, this was something they hadn't had before: a direct, if partial, admission of involvement. It changed the dynamics of the case, turning what had been cold into something far more volatile. The summer of 2023 brought a seismic shift. It was July, blistering and dry, when SWAT teams descended on a quiet house nestled in the sprawling suburbs of Henderson, Nevada. The neighborhood was the very picture of normal tree-lined streets, well-kept lawns, families going about their daily lives. But inside, the atmosphere was anything but ordinary.